Elizabeth, Rachel, I know you're probably having a crazy week, but your film was a roller coaster of emotions for me. And it had me thinking about the sacrifices that people make for their families when immigrating to a new country. And being a refugee is literally a life of uncertainty. And I felt that New Wave offered a sense of security and certainty, like a place where people could escape to and like escape all their worries. And in your case, you actually used New Wave to confront past trauma, not as an escapism. So how did you come up with this idea to do that?
Well, it wasn't easy and it wasn't that way. At first, it was an escape. It was a way for me to say that, it was like this. The entry point was, I'm going to do something noble. I was pregnant with my daughter in 2018. And I said, this is how I'm going to tell her a story because I didn't have parents and all my childhood memories were, this was the soundtrack, this music, because my uncles and aunties raised me and this is what they listened to. So that was just enough. And it felt so noble to say, I'm going to save a piece of history for my daughter and future generations and my community. And that would be it. It would be a historical look back. And to be honest, that would have been enough. Um, but I think that 4 years into the process was kind of when, the facade of what I was doing started to crack. And I think that was kind of a moment of like deeper reflection. And it came in through responses from my teammates, my advisors, and even my own daughter. My daughter wasn't criticizing the film, like my teammates. And when I say criticize, I mean, asking questions. But my daughter just asked the biggest question of all. She has a great relationship with her paternal grandparents. But she asked me, where are mine? Where are your parents? And that was the biggest question of all, right? It was kind of like, oh, the thing that I've been avoiding. And I would say, I was raised by these uncles and aunties. I was raised on this music. But the bigger question that was not being asked was, well, then where were your parents?
Mm.
Why were teenagers raising a child? They are children themselves. So I don't think I set out to make the film that you got to see. I think that I got led into this by just the process of discovery.
Yeah, it was kind of like an access point for you. This it's like where do you even begin to talk about
Yeah.
these issues?
Yeah,
And
where do you even start? Because it's been a lifetime of circumventing all of the issues, right? And New Wave was like the historical part of it was that just a way to circumvent. You just say, oh, the music, the players, the producers, the diaspora, the world. And you can keep going around in circles until you say, well, what's at the heart of it? Why did they need this so much? And then you start to go, well, where were their parents? What were their parents fleeing from? What were they fleeing from? And then you get led back down this circle of like,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Yes, I have. Oh,
this
yeah.
loss is deep. It's deep. And a music and friendship are like the things that could be a temporary salve, but it's not a permanent thing until you actually face what's wounded you.
yeah, otherwise you unintentionally create the same cycle you're trying to stop and become the person
That's
you're
right.
escaping. And Lydia was fascinating. Absolutely
Lynda?
fascinating. Lynda, sorry. She was absolutely fascinating. And what I took was Lynda, as well as other Vietnamese new wave artists, they were basically paving the way for what it means to be Vietnamese and American. There was really no template. It's just they were just doing their own thing. And so for you, Elizabeth, where did you look for inspiration when deciding who you wanted to be and what you wanted to become?
Myself?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Um, I don't think I had like a role model when I was a little kid. Um, I think it was my mom. Like even though I wasn't raised by her, I kind of saw her from afar and I was like, wow, look at my mom. She's a big boss. She makes money. She takes care of our family. you know, I have all the things materially that I need because my mom worked so hard. So, you know, as a little kid, it was my mom. And then as I got older, I think I was just a lot more resentful of people that I saw on TV, or like learned how to hate myself more, right? Because you look at the covers of magazines and you're like, I don't look like that on Vogue or Cosmo or whatever. And you're just, I don't know if I think it was very difficult for me to ever say somebody was a hero. Or, and at some point, you know, probably later in my high school years, I was always a reader, but the more I read, I started to just really admire the white male writers, you know.
Oh, so we don't need this section. Like, we
the
do need URL.
the obvious, like,
Yeah.
oh, Hemingway, the great American writers, and they're always mostly men.
Mhm.
So I think it had been a long journey in terms of like learning who my heroes are or were, but now that I really look back, it seemed like the people that I was afraid to accept in my own community, who were the hard workers, who were busting their ass, who were paving the way. But at that time, you know, they weren't the heroes that you saw on TV or you read in the books. So it was hard to say those were my heroes when I was younger. So these days now I'm like, oh man, they've been there all along. So I don't know if it's like, you know, until you walk a mile in their shoes, until you really know what it's like. But now I'm starting to have a lot more gratitude for the people that came before me. That you know, heroes aren't people that you see on headlines and their faces on covers of magazines. But I think a lot of people need that. I needed that probably when I was a kid too. You need the signs and the symbols.
Mhm. Yeah, it's funny, like we run away from who we are because sometimes we think people won't accept it or it's less than. So if I mimic this successful art, you know, then it's a journey. And the minute you're able to like face it, I think it's fine. And there's something, there were a lot of parallels between your mother and Lynda, and so many parallels. And one line that she said that really shook me was, everything will collapse if I'm lazy. I felt that in my bones. You know, I'm like, I feel the same way. And so I think it's very hard to love someone when you're constantly in survival mode. And so for you, how have you been able to prevent this survival mode from closing you off emotionally? Because they seem to be in this, okay, I have to survive America. I don't have time to love you. You know, so then how do you prevent those same instincts of survival and wanting to make it from closing you off?
How do I prevent myself from getting into survival mode from like what Lynda had said, if I'm lazy, everything will collapse?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm
It's
a
okay.
little congested. I think there are days I feel like I'm still in survival mode. And I didn't even realize to be able to express that is like, I feel like I've won half the battle,
Mhm.
is the recognition of it. Because I guess I've been in survival mode my whole life. And there's probably been moments of release along the way, but recognizing it now, I'm grateful for that through the process of making this film, that I can pause and in the journey of having a child. I feel like it's a privilege to be a mother in the position that I am right now. I have to remind myself that I have a daughter and I have a family and I have a social life and I have a career, and really try to compartmentalize them a little bit more each day now, because before I would work myself every, you know, morning, noon, and night, and I would only think about work, because I was like, if I don't try 10 times harder than, you know, a white man in this world, I won't make it. And now I'm like, I have to stop. It's 6 p.m. I have to close my work. I have to go to the park with my kid. I have to like look her in the eyes, and I want to give her that. So I think a lot of the being in survival mode has been dampened. Like I don't feel it as much anymore, and I don't feel that everything will collapse. But I used to feel that way. I don't think it's easy though, because you're like, you grew up in a world where you're like, it's never enough. You know, if we don't, like, we can't keep the lights on, we can't get food on the table, you know, and seeing my mom, the cycles that she's been through, and now her piece is just being alone, being, you know, in a remote place, like that's kind of the where she's evolved to. It's been nonstop for her in terms of survival mode, and I think it's hard for her too. And I don't want to be in that place years down the road. So I'm trying to savor, you know, I'm trying to savor every moment that I have with my daughter and my family. And that's really important to me, to not work at nights and to not make my weekends all about work.
Yeah, especially the industry that you're in, you know, it's almost like you have to do double just to maintain, because you don't know what could happen. Anything can, you know, your job is never stable, you know, you have to create that stability. And
Yeah.
the scene that crushed me is with your mother, when she actually opened up about why she was doing, like, explaining her actions. And women of that generation, like, they're not taught to speak about their past. You don't talk about the family. It's kind of like she had a moment where she's like, just tell her I'm dead. Like, I'm not talking about this. And I want to know for you, like, there's a fine line between I forgive you and I want to work it out with you, to I forgive you, but I have to let you go. And when it comes to family, I feel like this is so difficult. It's like, when do you decide to say, you know what, I have to let you go? So in your case, how do you draw that line when it comes to family?
I think that goes to the, you know, it's very similar to the last question too, in terms of survival. I think you have boundaries. If you respect yourself, you have those boundaries. And so I don't know if it's so much like I want to have this incredible relationship with her that I'm willing to sacrifice everything. I think it's more like I'm willing to go on this healing journey, and I have boundaries. Like, when this can take place, how much of myself I can give, because you realize we only have so much we can give on a day-to-day basis. And I think that does go with the same thing. You're like, okay, maybe I won't do it after 6 p.m. today. You know, you respect yourself. That means you respect other people's boundaries and you give space. I feel like I'm answering this a little indirectly, but I don't know if there's a direct answer for it in terms of, like, you know, the forgiveness journey. I think I'm just learning how to forgive myself too for the things that I didn't know. You know, I think that's the whole part of the film. Is like I went into this researching a community, then researching particular characters, then researching my own family history, and then getting down to learning more about my mom, and then feeling so devastated that we never had these conversations. I'm in my 40s now, and I'm, you know, I'm deeply hurting from the conversations we never had. You know, so I'm just like, oh, I hope I can forgive myself for that. So I think it's a little bit of like, I don't know, it's so much I forgive her. It's like, can I forgive myself, you know? And I'm working on that. I think that's a
Yeah.
big part of the, it's like, what's the next step after the film? Is like just kind of working on myself.
Pull this in from like.
Yeah, and reconciliation is a very long process, and it doesn't happen overnight. And you never want regrets. Like, a few of the people in your documentary, they mentioned, like, I wish I had kind of the moment that you had with your mother. They never had that. Their parents died too soon. And so after finishing the film, since you basically created a totally different movie than you intended, what new insights have you gained about yourself? Not just like as an individual, but also as a filmmaker.
I guess we all have the capacity to change. And we, you know, I don't know if I think about that. I always want to improve, but sometimes improvement isn't something so active, like externally active. And it takes a lot of deep reflection. And sometimes you need something to help you get inside, and you don't know what it is.
Hope you started creating.
I guess I'm not sure. I'm sorry, could you ask that question again? I'm like, what am
sorry,
I trying to say in this process?
Oh, sorry. So now that you've finished the documentary and you've gone on this journey, what new insights have you gained about yourself as a filmmaker and just as an individual?
Yeah, I think that was what I was trying to get at, is like, in this process, it just changed. The film changed, the original intention changed. I went from wanting to make a music documentary to making a deeply personal film about my own family history and my community's history, weaving it all in, that we're all holding around these things that really hurt us. And I guess as a filmmaker, as I approach other projects, be less sure of myself in a good way. Sometimes you set out on this journey and you're like, this is the film I'm making. I got to do everything that I can to make this version of my idea of the treatment of the thing that I wrote, like, be realized. But I'm ready for all the surprises and the twists and the turns, because you might write the plot twist in your script or on your treatment, but ultimately the film is going to be begging for something else. So that's what I've learned, and I think it very much reflects life.
Beautifully said. Well, ladies, it was great to meet you both. Your film was deeply cathartic, and I wish you all the best, and I hope you enjoy the festival, or what's left of it. I'm sure time is flying over there.
The talking point about.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time, ladies.